May feel the ogden down the front straight. Rivkin still right behind him, pacing him.
Hey, my name is George, and this is the Northeast RC Racer Podcast. I'm here with my buddies Toby Hampson, Tom Petrella. We got a guest spot tonight from Kevin Winters and Vin Manchenda. What's up, boys?
What's going on?
Yo.
Episode 15, that's what's going on. Forgot to mention that, so episode 15. 14 was a great time, right? We had some really cool guests. We had Kevin and Krista on from LCRC. And we had a really good chat with them. It was nice to really get some background information on them as people, how they started the track, what the draw is, why everybody loves going there. You know, the obvious, but for those who had never seen it or heard from it before, it was good. I was really happy. What about you guys?
Yeah, look, I've been going there for a few years now. It was kind of cool to hear more of the backstory, right? You know, I've heard it in bits and pieces, but I've been to kind of do it chronologically. It was really cool. And just they're damn good people, so. They got an awesome track, good people, always a good race crew there. What else can you ask for?
What, Toby? What about for you? You're always there for kind of business and pleasure. Was it good? Do you see anything different or hear anything you hadn't heard before?
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I went there was 2016. And I'm like, fuck this. I'm never going back. Like the competition in the Z main is insane. Like what, like I'm going back to dirt runners, like it was really quite intimidating, even down at the, at race number 1, on a Sunday morning. But, I went back and, once you go and you experience the efficient program and just hanging out for 3 or 4 days, and, it's an addiction, so I won't miss a race now. I think they have 6-7 races a year. So it's I told the wife last night, I'm like, look, there's 52 weekends in the year. I'm just 6. That's it. I know I'm gonna be gone for just 6.
It's 7.
Okay, well then 7.
It used to be 6,
okay.
right?
And so, Full Brawl and IBC. Okay, so it's 9, and then it's just 9 or 10. At 52, what's the problem?
10, 15, you just round it up to 15. And
it's a fraction. Let's just say it's a fraction. And all those other times it'll just be all about you.
Fair compromise.
Didn't seem overly impressed, but it seemed like a pretty good argument on my end.
In any formal corporate meeting, that would have been agreed upon instantly.
Right? Yeah.
What about you, Vin? It's easy
yeah.
for you. You got the boys, right? So it's like, it's the boys.
Yeah, I can't wait to go back to LCRC. It's about to be season opener time. I think we're less than 30 days away. So, that should be fun. Trains, we're getting ready to work on the track. And the outdoor track, the indoor track finally came together. Oh, we had our season opener. We had 146 entries come out.
I heard it was huge.
Yeah.
Track's huge.
It was huge. We had some really fast drivers come out too. And thank you to those guys. Zach St. Clair, Juan Lopez, among others, made it out there, and we battled it out. Those guys did great. So, yeah.
Come on. Spit it out.
What's up?
Your son crossed it.
Oh, well, no. He did well. He did well. He
did awesome, dude. He did awesome. It was great. He had an awesome battle with Zach Sinclair, and Zach is a formidable racer, but he and Zach's definitely got racing time on your son, although he had left the hobby and come back in. So, you know what I mean? You got a young guy coming up who's gaining experience, a guy who had it, forgot about it, retuning, resharpening his sword. And it was an awesome battle, dude. It was great. It was awesome.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Really cool. Yeah, man, it was really cool. I was happy. I would have been happy with either guy winning because, they both put up an awesome fight. So,
yeah.
It's good to see it was your son.
It was a crazy
Aren't
race.
You guys, right? You race though, even if you like finished 3rd, 4th, or even further down, if you're like racing good and you race clean and have a good battle, almost don't care where I finish at, as long as I feel like I raced well. Like some of my favorite races, I've come in second or third, but I felt like I drove the best I've ever driven. So you got level set expectations too, and you get in a good battle. There's nothing like battling with somebody for a few minutes. I had a race this weekend. Actually, Jim Lilly's helping with the outdoor track with his grandson, and we went for 5 or 6 minutes. I mean, side by side, passing, getting around each other, but always clean. It was awesome. It was a blast.
Sometimes the race is in fourth or fifth. It's not necessarily in first or second, especially if the lead guy's already checked out.
Oh, like you fast guys out there. It's like Formula One. I'm midfield.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
You're like 40+ king, man.
Well, 40 plus is midfield. 40 plus is like Haas and, maybe not Alpine, not that bad.
It's all about 40+. You say they have 50+ at DNC?
I saw qualified.
Right? That sounds great.
Anything to lower the odds.
Yeah.
Or increase them.
Or increase the entry count.
Trophy hunters over here.
All right. We have tonight we got an awesome guest that will be coming on in a few minutes. Before we get to that, we are going to be talking about one of our main guys, crew members, Tom Petrella, over there on the other cube on the top. Tom's opening a local track down in South New Jersey. I believe it's Clayton, New Jersey, from what I was told previously. And Tom's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on, and hopefully we got a pick to share by the time he's done. Take it away.
Nah, cool. Thanks, George. Nah, just excited to kind of, we talked a little bit of last episode, but making great progress. I got to give a huge shout out to Jim Lilly. He'll never hear this podcast because he doesn't pay attention that closely, but super hardworking dude. And we got the track going, man. It is down in Clayton. If you guys aren't familiar with Clayton is, it's right outside by Glassboro. There's 2 exits off of 55 that'll bring you right to it, like maybe 3 or 4 minutes away. We're actually behind another business, which is a commercial business, so we could run Nitro. Don't have to worry about noise and everything else, which is awesome. We've got plenty of space. We're starting out with a track that's 140 by 80, but we can make the track bigger. The guy that we're using the property from, Jim knows him, and he's knew their father. He's like, "What's the biggest track around?" He goes, "Let's make it that big. Let's make it even bigger." So this guy's all in. He's ready to buy RC cars. He's like, he's gung ho, but we also know it's a lot of work to maintain that. So we're gonna walk before we run. But no, I mean we're getting there. We're getting pretty close. Funny, as I was waiting here to get everything started, I know Brian's not on today, but I was looking at the train schedule, looking at the LCRC schedule, trying to build a schedule for us. I'm thinking we're probably going to open up in May. At this point, we're still waiting for the pipes to come in, but excited to get things rolling. Trying to think what other questions you guys might have about the place. It is topsoil. It's really clean topsoil. It's old farmland. It's amazing. We went through and we've been working on a little section on the front straight, and we went through the other day. I think there's a picture, Toby, you have. We got the ground all cleaned up and all the grass removed and laid out. And when it rains on that and we roll it, that ground gets hard as a rock. And you can see some of these posts that are there. I'm standing on the driver's stand. I was trying to put those posts in. I'm there with a trenching shovel, just chipping away at the dirt to try to get it to break up. So it's really firm. Not a lot of stones in it at all. So we don't know. We don't know yet in regards to how the soil is going to hold up, but it looks really good. Again, driver stands built. That's ready to go. Pit road we just finished up today. You can kind of see it there in a panoramic photo. We got our water tanks in the back. So at this point, we're waiting on pipe. Got to move some more dirt in for features, get the water system set up, and I think we're pretty damn close.
What are you using for water?
I see that.
It's kind of hard to see
in the background.
That big corner back there. We got 2 big water tanks, so
Nice.
we'll fill those up and we'll experiment. I know Kevin uses the laundry soap. I don't, and this is all new to me, so there's gonna be a big learning curve here. So I'll ask everybody to, you guys especially, and as well as everybody else that comes out, hey, be patient. We're looking forward to making a club track. I'm not looking to compete with LCRC or trains. Those guys are established, got great programs. But if we can get a good club program going with one-day races, bring some new people in the hobby, that's really the intent. But we should be ready for water. We'll see what we have to add to the dirt and everything else to make it best.
Is it really dusty? Have you run on it yet?
No, we run on it. Doesn't get real dusty. I mean, it gets pretty hard pack. It's again, I'm surprised how hard it gets. I'm a little bit worried about tire wear, honestly, but we'll see. I don't think it's going to be that that bad. Again, we'll see how everything holds up. We're going to have definitely a bunch of watering stations in there and do our best to keep dust to a minimum. I know a lot of guys. It's funny. A lot of guys are reaching out to that. We haven't raced with a while. Some names. George, you probably remember Billy Pappenberg from over at Wall.
Nice.
He wants to get back out there.
That'd be cool. Just thinking about it.
Actively messaging with Billy, already seeing his rebuilt Armada, and he can't wait to get out. And he's going to be, a couple races, and Billy's going to be, a formidable guy to compete with for sure.
Kid was always fast.
Yeah. Zach Sinclair bought an A-scale buggy. The Cramners, who are super fast on carpet and oval, they got some A-scale cars. A bunch of guys come to my track are already, all in. So we're gonna have a pretty good crew out there. Should be a good time. And get you guys to come down from up north. It'll be good to go.
It's gonna be like getting the band back together in South Jersey.
Looking forward to it, man. It's gonna be awesome.
I've seen a couple other guys that I haven't seen since track 70 days. Names pop up that are interested and or already getting motivated to come out when you give the green light. So it's opening day is going to be a lot of handshakes, a lot of hugs, a lot of good time, bunch of cold ones. And hey, is it near that custard shop on the way home from Vineland, man? That was one of the things Alan and I were talking about the other day. We're like, remember we used to leave Vineland all the time on the way home? There was this awesome custard place. I think it was called Custard King or something like that on the way home.
No, I don't know if there's an ice cream shop. That could be dangerous for me. But I tell you what, you have to find out how Jerry Hoagland runs a big oval track, and I know Brian's gonna be running his oval program this year. He always brings Mr. Softband during race days. So
awesome.
Just what all the underweight guys need before they head home.
Now, you're looking thinner, buddy. I don't know if we get a special lens in that camera or what, but you looking thinner.
6 days a week, running.
God bless you.
That's it. Trying to live long. That's it, brother. That's awesome. I'm super stoked, as well as I know the other guys are. And any idea when opening day is?
I'm tentative right now for early May. I was hoping to do something in April, but I'm just not sure it's going to happen. I know for me, April's tough because I'm looking forward to going down to P&B in a few weeks. Sure. I got that coming. Then we got LCRC's opener, and then Supercross is coming to Philly. And I bet a lot of us are going to go see Supercross in Philly. Nice. So between that's 3 of the 4 weekends right off the bat, and the other weekends, one of the other weekends is Easter. So, poof, there goes April.
Cool, man. Memorial Day weekend. That's my birthday. Set it up.
There you go. So, Toby, I'll send you the schedule first. You can pass it by the wife, so you get add another 10 weekends to your previous 10.
Awesome.
So, how many times do you think you're going to race a month around? Like 1 or 2, or?
I'm at least twice a month. I was just looking at the schedule based upon I got 12 dates right now in place that I'm not confirmed yet, but May through the beginning of October.
All right. And are you going to do practice days or anything like that, or?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
We are going to behind another business, so it's not like free reign. Jim and I are going to have to be there, but we want to definitely do practice nights. And I know I'm going to want to get some wheel time in, especially on those off weeks. And if we're going to be there, there's no reason we can't throw something up. Make sure you guys are following on Facebook, Rhythm RC, or check our website. I'll keep things updated there. Hey, we're going to do an event. Come on out. You guys want to practice? And we'll practice, set up a weekend day or a few weekdays a week.
That sounds awesome.
Cool.
Nice.
Great stuff. Kevin, good question. Kevin ultimately wants to know, Tom, if there's a locker or a garage on site that he can lay claim to so that he can kind of move in and basically spend a few days.
He'll be in the race. So real quick, I know we're trying to watch our time here agenda-wise, but I had sent you guys some pictures, or I think I sent Kevin a picture of where the track is going to be, a little bit of layout. Kevin, within 2 minutes, is like, oh, I found where it's at on Google Maps because he found the water tower was in the back and found exactly where we were putting the track.
Yeah. Well, it says the town name right on it, so I just.
But it was pretty small. You had to zoom to do a little bit of research. You were all over.
Yeah. Hey,
he's the wizard, man. That's what I always say. Kevin is
a Nitro fiend, right? Or RC fiend.
All right,
Kev,
well,
I think we got.
I'm the one who came up with a timeline, so I'm going to zip it here unless you guys have any other questions so we can kind of stay on task here.
Nice. Yeah.
We are going to bring in our guest in 1 second. So the next segment is brought to you by 46RC.
Hey,
If you're
that's
looking
me.
to have some media coverage going on, or a race event that you may have that's in the local tri-state area, reach out to Toby Hampson. Him and his son do an awesome job doing race production. Motorama is a perfect example of the level of skill of RC media coverage they bring to the table. So this segment is brought to you by them. If you are interested, reach out to Toby directly. You can find him at his page, or you can message us here at the podcast. In the meantime, our next guest is Ed Bridges, and Ed is from EB Mods. And Ed is joining us tonight to give us some lessons on Nitro motors. So let's bring Ed into the podcast.
Yo.
What's up?
What up, YouTube?
There he
Ed Bridges, EB Mods coming at you. And I'm super honored to be here tonight, guys. I'm super excited, super nervous, but I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Thanks
Awesome.
for being here, buddy.
I'm honored, man. I truly am.
Cool. So listen, a whole bunch of these guys know you a whole lot better than I do. As I was messaging to you earlier, and hopefully you found no offense. I'm not the Nitro guy in the podcast. Anybody that knows me in the group or in the Northeast knows that I'm the electric guy, but I'm always there, always to help out, turn a screw, help one of my Nitro guys who needs somebody in the pit area. So I'm super stoked to learn about what you are going to bring to the table tonight. I did take the images that you sent, and I do have them ready to present. So when you're ready, and as through the discussion, you want me to throw one of them up there, just tell me, and I will facilitate that. In the meantime, I'll let some of the other guys kind of introduce you or kind of lead the way because they know the Nitro smell. So take it away, boys.
Awesome. I'm ready.
That means Tom or Toby or
Tom,
Vinny
no,
step
no,
in
Tom.
and kind of lead the way.
Tom volunteered to keep this shit together today.
Yeah,
Oh, so I'm doing that voice.
I'll do it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I'm the electric guy talking
Well, no,
about
Ed, look, Ed.
as the flywheel, huh? Anybody got an extra foam with some oil in it? I mean, as your Venturi.
I have a couple things I'd like to talk about, but if you have questions, I'm open to any questions.
Why don't you start out? Give us a
RC?
little bit of background. We know you've been. We've talked a little bit before you got on, right? Long history in the hobby, doing a ton of stuff with Nitro motors. You sent us some cool charts earlier, which was really cool to see. But maybe start off with, let's establish, we know you're an expert, but for the guys that are listening, the gals might be listening, give us a little bit of background. How many years doing this? How you got into the hobby? And some of the stuff you've learned along the way.
Okay, so EB Mods was actually founded in 2001. That's when I started the company, but I've been into the hobby in the 90s, Grasshopper. Actually, I used to have a Radio Shack, Golden Arrow, the Red Arrow. We started and then went to the Grasshopper, Dolphin. There was a whole bunch of them. But, later in life, I got into RC racing. And my local hobby shop here had A-scale nitro buggies, the old turbo Inferno Burns. And, when I seen those, I was like, I had to have one, and I've been hooked ever since then. That was probably 98 or so. And, I'm always been a two-stroke engine guy, so I just started tinkering with them back then. And I don't know, the hobby kind of turned into a business originally. So I was, that's about it. I mean, I from 2001, I used to buy a lot of Novarossi engines, sell them. Then Hobbyco approached me about doing engines directly for them with OS. And I did lots of engines for them for a lot of years, and then moved to Trinity. Along the whole way, I was writing for RC Driver magazine, doing dyno testing, article reviews. So, but I've always been into RC since, as far as I can remember, when we came back from Germany in the 80s. My father would buy us little, RC cars from Radio Shack or whatever.
So you ever run any electric, or you're nitro only?
Golden Arrow, Grasshopper, Electric, then Nitro from that point.
So yeah,
Very political answer. Good job, Ed.
I was gonna say, Tom, I don't think Radio Shack had a Nitro car, Tom.
No, I basically once I became an adult and I could buy the RC car myself, I went to the hobby shop. I want a Nitro car, and I bought a Rustler. I think I had it for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, I want an A scale. So, and that I never looked back. So.
Cool.
Sweet. So, you talked about a lot from when you started, right? And you mentioned some big names in between. So,
Yeah, I'm
what
super excited, super nervous. So I get
No, it's all
excited, and
That's awesome, man. You dropped a whole bunch of bombs out there, so it's really for us to, kind of pick them apart. So you mentioned a bunch of names out there, and you mentioned you had started a business in regards to engines. So explain to the people that aren't familiar with you or what you were doing for some of these companies, so that what were you doing, let's say, to a Nitro motor, where you were taking somebody else's and modifying it and like in different ways.
Yeah, so I would take the stock engine and I would basically blueprint it, get the timing numbers off of it, weigh the piston sleeve, the rod, the crank, basically get the whole blueprint on the engine, not only the timing, but the balancing ratio between the rotating assembly and the crankshaft. And I would try to improve upon it and a little bit of the flow as well. I clean up some ports, set the compression ratios up the right way. Back in the day, you could really get a lot more power out of the engines. The newer engines, you got to work a little bit harder at. But, you got to blueprint the engine before you can really do anything to it. So
blueprinting the engine for somebody like myself that's never heard that term before, just basically going through all the different components, getting their weights, and basically the manufacturer's specs. Is that what that is?
Yeah, so the manufacturer doesn't give you all the specs. So the head button itself, like I'll actually CC the head button. So I'll measure the volume of the head button. I have a small syringe and an acrylic plate that I made that has 2 holes that allows me to fill the combustion chamber and actually measure the volume. And then you can use a timing wheel, but I use a dial indicator and I measure the linear distance of the piston relative to the top dead center of the engine, and measure the distance for the exhaust port, the total open duration, and you can blueprint the whole timing of the engine. So
Kevin Winters is having an orgasm right now, by the way.
Oh,
we're right. Me and him already had talked about all this. Yeah, I like to hear it again.
Yeah. Getting the compression ratio set up is big. A lot of manufacturers set their compression ratios a little low just to compensate for putting the engine on the edge. So you don't, it makes it, I won't say easier to tune, but it gives you kind of a broader tuning window.
So how are you doing? That's out of curiosity. You got me nosy now. How do you change it? Is it just head shims, or is there more to it?
Yeah, it's head shim. So once you know your combustion chamber volume, you actually measure your power stroke of your engine. The power stroke of your engine is top dead center to the top of your exhaust point. This is actually the swept volume. So in a 4-stroke engine, you got basically the full stroke of the engine you calculate into compression. On a 2-stroke engine, it's when the exhaust port closes. So you got to figure this is a trapped compression ratio. So you calculate that. And so for our engines, it's for 30% nitro, you're looking for about a 7.5 to 8.5 to 1, or 7.5 to 8 to 1 compression ratio. It doesn't really matter about your head clearance. It's the compression ratio that really matters. The head clearance is more about the expansion of the parts and making sure you have clearance that nothing hits each other. So yeah, you figure your swept volume, your trapped compression ratio, then you figure your head button volume and your shim volume, and you calculate your compression ratio in that way. What I do is I actually figure out full geometric compression ratio, which is the full stroke of the engine as well. So at idle and low RPM, your engine's working off a trapped compression ratio. So the exhaust port's rushing out, it's coming back, it's pressurizing the cylinder. You're at like a 7.5, 8.5, 9 to 1 compression ratio. And then once your engine gets up onto the pipe and you get the dynamic compression from your back pressure of your pipe, you go all the way up to 11 to 12 to 1 compression ratio.
Ed, a couple of questions.
Sure, I'm sorry. Sorry to ramble.
No.
Please ramble. This is good stuff. We want it.
Did you?
Great
Was
stuff.
this was this something you were kind of like you did education for, or you studied, or you just learn all this kind of on the fly, and one thing led to
No.
the next?
So I did go to a technical school for diesel mechanics. I ran the dyno there at actually the school as well. I've just always been an internal engine combustion guy. I actually remember when I was about 9 years old, that's when I got bit by the bug. When I had a 1971 MX, Yamaha MX 100 dirt bike that had the oil injection, that had your oil reservoir under your seat. And you just, you put your oil in there, you put your gas in there. I didn't know nothing about mixing. And my dad was in the Army. We lived off base, but I was riding through a school field and the cops were chasing me. And the oil line came disconnected, engine seized up. So long story short, my dad rebuilt it, told me I had to mix the gas, got rid of the oil injection. And he goes, don't get caught by the cops. So, so then it's like, okay, I got to go fast. So then I was always asking him when he was rebuilding it with the piston and sleeve. It's like I was watching what he was doing. And my dad in the Army was actually an instructor for the wheel vehicle department. So he taught how to rebuild engines and generators and stuff. So we were always kind of part of that, me and my brothers. So, that was when I kind of got bit by the internal combustion engine. And I read all the popular science books I could. I'd go to the local library. I'd read books about internal combustion. And then two-stroke engines, just because of the dirt bike, my dad always told me, you bring me a two-stroke bike, I can make it fast, a lot easier. It doesn't take a lot of money. You don't have to buy any cams or valves or any of this. If you blueprint the engine, you can lighten the piston, you can balance, you can do stuff with a two-stroke engine with just knowledge and make it better. And I was always into two strokes for that reason.
So you said you were basically selling engines for Nova RC OS. So every single engine that you would get, you would do this work on every engine. Is that right?
So when I was buying the Nova RC engines, I would blueprint every engine, serial number them. I knew where every engine went to every customer. I have tablets full of customers still to this day.
Huh. When
I signed with Hobbyco, they were sending me so many engines. I was doing them in bulk. The business, I grew. I was very blessed. It was kind of a little overwhelming at the time, but we were doing 500 to 800 engines a month. So I bought some milling machines, lathes. If you buy an engine from me, the next engine you buy should be just as good or better. So I had to have that consistency. So I've always been into trying to manufacture stuff to make it consistent. So
very cool.
So let's do a quick plug for you. Where do people find access to your motors? Do you have a web page, or how you selling all this stuff?
Yeah, evmods.com is my website. I don't really have, I do a limited supply of engines. I'll do like 12 at a time, and they pretty much sell out pretty quick. And so it's like a waiting list right now. I do offer a lot of services. I offer break-ins. I have 2 different break-in machines here that I use, plus the dyno. When I break in your engine, I also heat cycle your engine to make sure it's fully broken in and ready to go. But yeah, evmods.com is the website to go to check everything out.
Cool.
So what's the break-in process on one of your machines like?
So I have the oil bath system, and I have this new smart engine oil lapping system that I got from Ryan Lutz that actually runs the oil through it. Both really accomplish the same thing. The end result's the same, but I'm really digging the smart engine from Lutz that I picked up. It seems to get the job done a little quicker and the same results. So,
did you get the bath one or the one where you just put mount the motor?
Oh yeah, so I mount the engine and it runs the oil through the engine. It's the oil.
Yeah, I have that. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I use the Maxima 927 oil, and the reason why I went with that because they don't really tell you what oil to use.
No,
but I wanted to use an oil that would mix with methanol. Since I'm actually running the engine through there and the oil is actually saturating in the rear bearing, which has a poly cage, I want to make sure the oil that might penetrate into that is going to mix with the RC fuel, so I'm not going to have any dry lubrication.
Very cool.
Got that, KW?
Yeah.
I think Kevin has this one here too.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Yeah, this one works awesome. I mean,
it works.
The smart engine's nice because it's programmable. You know, you can program it for what you want, and I've really been digging that one a lot lately, and it gets really good results. So, in a shorter period of time, which is good for me because, you know, there's only 1,440 minutes in a day, and I break that down. I have a stopwatch here behind me. I time everything that I do after I get out of my full-time job. You know, like I have an engine here on the dyno now that I'm heat cycling. So I do 5 heat cycles on every engine. So it's a 15-minute heat cycle, 15 minutes cooling, starting it up. So, you know, it gets tough sometimes.
Yeah.
How many minutes are there in a day?
1,440. And you're supposed to sleep for 480, but let's just say you only sleep for 400, so
Got it.
I actually get up every morning at 3:30. I'm usually in bed by 7, 8 o'clock. And when Toby said earlier,
not tonight.
No, not tonight.
Well, Ed, you're a huge wealth of knowledge, and we got a pretty broad group of people listening to this, right? We're getting into the season. I know a lot of new guys are considering Nitro. And we probably maybe should have started here and there. We kind of talked some little more in-depth stuff, but you're the expert in the room. Kevin Winters as well, another big expert for us. But what's your recommendations for a new Nitro owner? Like, if you had to say, like, hey, these are the top things to either look for, things to avoid, common mistakes. I don't know the best way to do it, right? But think about someone who's like, hey, this is my first Nitro motor. I'm just getting into it. You know, what am I looking for? What am I trying to avoid?
Overthinking it. I think a lot of times people get into RC racing, Nitro racing in general, and it's hard to fight that urge to tune your engine every time. You know, when you actually have your engine tuned and you're happy with the tune, you shouldn't have to touch the tune every time you start it up. The weather change has to be pretty drastic to justify something like that. And I think right now, a lot of people use engine heaters. So I actually have one here on the dyno they use heat guns. And our engines are designed to keep the carburetor cool while the engine's running, because the carburetor temperature is going to affect the tune of the engine. You know, it's methanol based. Methanol has a low boiling rate. So when you heat up the engine in a static condition where the engine's not running, it transfers heat to the carb and changes basically the tune of the engine when you go to start it up the next time. And I think a lot of guys that get new into it, they start chasing that tune, not realizing it's just the carburetor that's, you know, a little hot. Because you can actually heat up the carburetor to the point that it'll vapor lock and you won't even start your engine. You'll be turning your engine over asking why it won't start. That's because your carb's 120 degrees. So on the dyno, I actually measure carb temperature, engine mount temperature, exhaust gas temperature, you know, of course, cylinder temperature. And you can see the clear difference in the performance of the engine when the carb's hot or when the carb's actually in a tuned dynamic state, you know. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I hope I'm not rambling. So.
No,
Makes sense to an electric guy.
You said keep it simple, and you give us a million parameters. But I mean,
I know. I'm sorry.
Stuff, right? And you need to overthink it, right? This is your business, and you're the guru at it. But for the average guy, you don't have to overthink it that much. I mean, what's your thoughts on tuning by temperature? Because I know that's a common way. At least it used to be. I don't think it is as much anymore. But I'd be curious your take on that.
If you're tuning by temp, you're really chasing that temp. You're not chasing the tune. You really shouldn't have to chase anything. But years ago, Jamie Gregg used to race for me. I mean, back in 2001, I met Jamie Gregg at J&K Raceway. I think it was Shippensburg's PA. And he started racing for me. And I really worked with him on the tuning engines. Jamie's really smart. I mean, he had it figured out. But, I mean, when it comes to tuning with a temp gun, you're better off just throwing it in the woods and just ignoring it. When you tune for performance, some days your engine might want to run 250. Some days it might want to run 230. The humidity really affects this, but it's performance that you want. As long as your air-fuel ratio is right, you got a little bit of smoke coming out, your engines are great. You know, you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, Jamie said the same thing on the podcast when he was on here.
Yeah,
and
man. I mean,
just don't pay attention to the temp gun. I mean, I think the temp gun is good for a new guy, but for majority of the people, it's definitely, you know, tuned for performance basically, and you know, and for break-in too. I guess a temp gun's good, but other than that, I mean, I don't use a temp gun, you know.
For braking, it's good because when you break in an engine, there's really three things you need. You know, you need a lot of fuel, you need it to be rich, and you need the temperature to get the expansion of everything. So that's why when I heat cycle it, I can control that on the dyno. I have low RPM. I get the rich setting, and I get the heat in the engine. But yeah, I mean, tuning for temp, you're chasing that temp, and it's just it's going to hurt you more than help you. I truly believe that. So
Yeah.
How about preheating the motor before you fire it up for whether a new motor or a well-used motor?
So yeah, preheating comes back to the engine heaters and the heat guns. So heat guns are more prone to being able to heat the carburetor up more versus the engine. But even the engine heaters on there, they're transferring heat to the carb. So when you first start it up, your engine may sound lean, but you shouldn't chase the tune at that point. If it ran great for you the previous qualifier, when you came in after your qualifier, let's say it's idling, purring like a kitten, and then you go to start it up for your next qualifier and it sounds like it's lean, it's really not. It's because the carburetor's hot. The tune might be lean because the carburetor's hot, but once it gets up to operating, status, like everything's in this full operating temperature, it'll come back to tune. The best time to tune your engine is actually after like 5 minutes of running a practice tank or a qualifier. You should pull into pit row. Your engine should idle perfect. It should have a nice idle. That's the best time to throw your final tune on the engine. So,
Great advice.
So electric guy here. Glow plugs, right? Important thing for nitro engines, right? I know there's hot ones, cold ones. I don't even use them, but that's what I hear. What's the difference? What do you recommend for guys to use?
So glow plugs basically change your ignition timing of the engine. So a hot glow plug is going to ignite quicker. A cold glow plug is going to ignite slower, which is going to allow more combustion pressure to increase. I know a lot of guys run the P3. I personally run the P4s, especially in the summer. If I'm indoors, high humidity type of condition, the P3. The P3 is kind of the go-to plug for the OS engines. But you can get more power and runtime out of a P4 plug on an OS engine, but your tuning window gets a little bit narrow because you're igniting it later in the after top dead center versus with a hotter plug. So,
Ed, what's your thoughts on caster oil? I know there's a lot of synthetic oils that are being used out there. Some still use caster, some don't. Be curious what your thoughts are. I read some stuff a ways back, and you can tell me if I'm wrong because I read it on the internet. Doesn't mean everything on the internet's true, surprisingly. But like they say, the molecules, if the motor does get too hot or the oil does start breaking down because of temperature or wear or whatever, that the caster molecule will actually expand as it gets hot, where some of the synthetics will actually break down. Not sure if that's true, and even if it is, if it's relevant.
That's that. As far as I know, that's true from all my research I've done as well. I always like a little bit of castor oil in my fuel. But real quick, I want to touch back on the P4 glow plug. I also like the P4 glow plug because the coil wire is a little thicker and the plug holds up a little bit longer. So, and then back to the castor, I like a little bit of castor. Pure synthetic is good, but it does if you get it up above the boiling point of the oil, it's it breaks down quick, so you can seize up your engine relatively quick. Yeah. And I have an example of that. So I don't know if you can see that. That's the exhaust port side of an engine, which is your hottest part of your engine because it's your exhaust port. That'll seize up quicker, and that's from somebody that was running all synthetic fuel and ran into a little lean. I have no problem against it. I mean, you just got to know what you're dealing with when you run it. So
yeah, when you miss your tune with the synthetic, and then it's engine could be really dry and everything inside for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love the caster. My favorite oil of all time, I know a lot of people probably haven't heard of this. It's called the Blendzall 460. That's caster's like kind of synthetic blend. That's a lot of RC fuels are made with that. And also the Motoil Micro. They use that in some RC fuels as well. So they actually have Motoil Micro that has a picture of an A-scale buggy and a helicopter on the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's what I use in this break-in machine here.
Mm-hmm.
So, out of all the engines that are sent to you, right, or companies that you're affiliated with, what's your engine of preference to do work on, or what's your opinion of all the different engine manufacturers? If somebody was out there and they wanted to go buy a motor, right, and send it to you to get some work done on it, what would be your direction to say to them? Hey, all these are good, but buy that one.
There's a lot of great engines on the market. I mean, obviously, kind of biased to the OS engines. I used to do lots of them back in the day. The OS really has the two-stroke engine, I think, design and development down. They really take it serious. But the new Nova engines are great. I've worked with Andrea Rossi in the past. I mean, he knows what he's doing for sure. I mean, there's a lot of good engines. Pico is a really highly underrated engine. They make great power. There's great, even Taiwan-based engines. The Alpha engine that Ryan Lutz runs. I have two of those here. I have one personally in my buggy. The SH engines. There's a lot of great engines on the market. So I would say, get whatever fits your budget, kind of.
What's the most impressive timing numbers you've seen in an engine, straight out of the box? They were this engine's really good. It doesn't need anything. Could be years ago, could be now. I don't know if you've been measuring the newest engines or.
You talking off-road engines?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because I have a marine engine. I have 5 marine engines here I'm doing. And they all have slight different timing, on-road engines, off-road engines. So off-road engine, I would say the OSB 2104, that engine's pretty dialed. So on the dyno, it makes great power. The runtime seems really good with it, but it's consistent. I mean, of course, the engines I do, the OS XEB engines are great engines. The Drake engines. The Drakes make actually really good power. They kind of remind me a lot of the old RV Concept engines where they were a square stroke engine. But I mean, OS-based engines are really what I prefer, but I'll work on pretty much if you race 8-scale off-road or on-road, I work on those engines. So.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your backplate. You were pretty much the creator of the boost backplate, right?
Correct. Yep. Absolutely.
So how did you come up with that idea? Just messing around, or?
No, actually, there's a guy named Rich Reed. He used to import the CMB engines with Andy Brown back in the day. And he came to my shop back in probably 2003, because this was before I was with OS. And he brought a backplate that had the holes that went all the way through like that. But they were huge holes. And we dyno tested it. And back in the day, I used load props. So I actually used airplane props, and I have a series of 12 props that I would test. And basically, the way load props work is, if you can spin this prop more RPM than previously, you're making more power. I mean, the manufacturers have this stuff down. But we tested the backplate. They already knew it didn't work. He's like, yeah, we tried this. It didn't work. So I just kind of thought about it more there's got to be something to this. The backplate's a place where there's got to be improvement to. And then I started testing, and then I went with smaller holes, and I figured out that the hole size can't be bigger than the actual jet size of the carburetor. So the jet size of your carburetor is 60 thousandths of an inch. So that's what the holes have to be coming through the backplate. And then I realized, okay, nothing was happening, and I then machined the ball pockets on top, where you see those ball pockets cut in. Those ball pockets now become low energy, which create basically a suction behind it, which draws the fuel up. And then those 60 thousandths holes that go down act basically like a separate spray bar, a jet that sprays into your port runners of your engine. But this all happens because of the scavenging pulse of your engine. So when your exhaust port opens, the pressure pulse rushes out. That creates a low pressure behind it, which draws fuel up from the crankcase. And as that's pulling across the surface of that, it's drawing fuel up through it. That's actually how it works. It's not the fuel flowing through the crank and hitting the backplate. It's when the fuel's actually being scavenged. It draws more fuel and actually sprays it better.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
Does
Impressive.
that make it okay?
No, that was really cool, man. You know,
So now
I'm
you
an
have those
electric
for
guy.
sale on your website again, right?
I do, but I have a limited supply right now. I sold quite a bit of them. I make a limited amount of them. You know, like I work a full-time job, obviously, but my boss allows me. He's a great boss. He allows me to use the machines to make all the RC stuff that I love to do. He actually ordered me a water jet today, which I'm super excited about that.
Nice.
So it's just a Wazer, you know, it's like the tabletop version. But because you need this, I'm like, yeah, sure, order for me. But yeah, I just so I make a limited supply during the year, and so.
Is
Yeah,
this
I
your
do
full?
plan to make-
This isn't your full time, right? You have a normal job during the day and then come back and do
Yeah, I
another
do
job
have
at
a
night, basically.
Exactly. I have a normal job. Actually, I'm in bed normally. I get up at 3:30 in the morning. I do my online website stuff like process orders or whatever. Go to work. I start work at 6. I get out at 2, and then I come home, and I do everything else that I need to do here. Run engines, break them in, process more orders if anything's through the website, and get them ready to ship out. But yeah, I love my full-time job because I have I get to use the CNC machines. My boss is awesome. He's actually going to start racing RC cars. His brother's going to start racing RC cars this year, so he's got a truggy. We're all ready to go. So
Cool.
Any
So
tips
what's
for
your favorite engine?
my favorite engine of all time is obviously the OSV spec, but they don't make that engine there.
Yeah.
If I could go to OS, which and have an engine made, I would want that engine again. I would make some changes, but that was my favorite all-time engine. Back in the day, we would get 10 minutes runtime with that engine with a 9mm Venturi. So
Yeah.
it's just about having the right setup. And the exhaust pipes back then were more tuned for the engine. OS tuned their pipes more for their engines back then. Now they're more generalized. So you buy an OS pipe, it works for the OS engine, but it might also work for the Nova engine or the Reds engine or something like that as well.
Kev, I'm sure you got 50 more questions to come. And
Well, Vin had one.
We definitely got some more time for Ed, based on how we're doing so far. Vin, I think you got a question you were going to ask?
Yeah, I was going to go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I drank a lot before I came on, so I was really nervous. So hopefully,
Dude, you're doing awesome. We can listen to you all night, but we have a tendency to go long on everything. So it's not you, it's us. But I'm loving this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. You drank a lot. Was it coffee or beer?
White Claw.
Oh, okay. Either way, brother. It's all right.
That's the job done.
Vinny, go ahead with your question.
I was going to say for those newer drivers, installing the engine flywheel and the whole collet assembly, do you have any tips for them on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure after you put your collet on the crankshaft, I was looking to see if I have something here, that you pull your crank all the way forward and push your collet down. I've actually had about 3 engines lately come in from customers for inspection that they didn't do that, and the rod rubbed the back plate. And on the one engine, the flywheel was actually slipping on the crankshaft. He couldn't even get the clutch nut off.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to make sure you slide your collet on, pull your crank, push that down with your fingernail or a flat tip, and make sure your crank is pulled forward all the way, because your collet will clinch down wherever you put it. If you put it a 1/4 inch off the face of the bearing and you tighten it down, it's going to clinch right there. So
That's good advice. Thanks.
yeah, I mean literally 3 customers within the past probably 2 months had that issue. So it's everybody's afraid to tighten down their clutch nut. You don't need to use Loctite. It can take 10 foot-pounds of torque, which you're not going to get with a T-handle wrench. So torque it down. Don't be afraid of it. If you break it, I'll buy your engine.
Fair enough.
So just I need to see a video of you breaking it. I don't need somebody breaking it off with a hammer.
So,
I
Ed,
broke my crank.
what about engine maintenance, right? I'm not, as I said, not a Nitro guy, but around plenty of the guys and always like to learn. And definitely going to hit you up on some 2-cycle gas or boat information on the off channel when we're done. But
Yeah.
aside from that, what kind of maintenance are guys looking at, right? Like, so, right, what kind of bearing maintenance is there in your motor? How long do typically the bearings last? Is there any bearing specification you recommend? Ceramic, non-ceramic? Do you like certain bearing companies? So on and so forth. Any kind of insight you can give on that?
Yeah, so don't run ceramic front bearings. They don't hold up to the starter box beating that the engines take when you actually start them. Rear ceramic bearings are good. You got less rotating weight. They just take a little bit more time to break in. And you know, a lot of times people like to change out their bearings. If you feel any notchiness in your bearings at all, change them out. Don't even take a chance with it. But when you change your bearings, remember you got to re-brake your engine in. You're not really worried about breaking in your piston and sleeve, but you need your bearings to burnish themselves in. So meaning that you want to stay lower RPM, like 24,000 or less, and let them balls turn in your bearing, like putz around, do some figure eights, let your bearings break back in before you actually go back out on the track. Because if you put a new bearing in and then go out to the track and race tune it, that bearing's only going to last about a gallon of fuel and it's going to be shot.
Great advice.
Interesting. Yeah.
You have to break the engine back in, even if you change your connecting rod. A lot of guys like to change their connecting rods out after a gallon and then go right back out and race tune. No, you got to break that connecting rod bushing back into your crank pin. The wrist pin needs to break into the bushing on the top part of the rod, you know, and you got to take it a little bit easy so everything burnishes in and breaks in. So,
Yeah, I've seen people change their bearings and then explode the engine right after.
yeah, because they didn't break it in. The bearings will actually skid and they'll get flat spots and then they'll heat up. And then, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much done at that point. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah. And anytime you have a runaway, you always want to, you know, at least look through your exhaust port and make sure you don't have any scuffing on your exhaust port side, because that's where it'll happen first, you know, so.
For sure.
Really good.
What about servos for controlling nitro motor? Meaning servo to carburetor, right? Like, is there any preference? You like one brand over another?
Well, I use Nitro Pro. I love those servos. They've lasted me, you know, 2 years now. I haven't had to worry about anything. Yeah, I mean, most of the servos today are plenty fast enough, plenty strong enough. You know, I'm happy with what I got. So, I mean, I actually find myself sometimes turning down the speed on the servos because it's too fast for me and my X potential. So,
what do you use for a return spring on your carburetor? How do you use? Like, I'm using hair ties that I constantly watch and I'll change it.
I'm just using rubber bands right now. I actually have a carburetor design from years ago that I designed, and I sent it to Nova Rossi, but we never made it. And it actually has an internal throttle return spring into it.
Cool.
It's probably online somewhere, but you know, someday I'll actually probably machine it and make it. I'm just, you know, I get busy sometimes, and it's I got a lot. I'm working on the exhaust pipes. That's something I really want to come out with this year, is my own custom exhaust pipes, American-made pipes for the engines. So
Awesome.
That's awesome.
That's actually two questions that I had, you know, just waiting for somebody else to say it. But how significant is the pipe for the motor? You know,
the pipe is huge.
Any Tom, Dick, and Harry's pipe, or is, you know, you only
No. When it comes to exhaust pipe setup, I mean, again, it comes down to blueprinting the engine. So, like, this is where the exhaust port opens and your transfer port opens, like your intake opens. That's called your blowdown duration. That's the amount of time the cylinder has to bleed down cylinder pressure before the intakes open. This really affects your header length of your engine, and then the total length to basically the mid body of your exhaust pipe, because you have to figure out your pressure pulse speed, which is the speed of sound, and then based off the temperature of your exhaust port. So I measure exhaust gas temperature on the dyno. So at about 1.25 inches off the piston, the exhaust gas is about 900 degrees. Then about the center of the exhaust pipe, it's about 750 degrees. So you calculate your speed of sound there and the total length that you need. So most of today's pipes are just generalized to work with a wide range of engines, but not optimized to work with one particular engine. So you can really gain a lot more runtime if we start dialing in the exhaust pipes for each individual engine. I truly believe that we can get a great runtime, like 10-minute pits wouldn't even be a question.
So what do you think is for an engine wise, not exhaust, what is the biggest thing that leads to runtime in an engine, you think?
Low speed needle tone. Your low speed needle really affects your runtime. And then exhaust pipe. I mean, when I change exhaust pipes out here in the dyno, usually the needle I have to change the most is the low speed needle. The high speed almost stays the same, but it's the low speed needle, and that really affects runtime. So.
But say if you were going to mod an engine, what's something that maybe would possibly you think that would give more runtime?
So what I really focus on, me personally, is the balancing ratio of the rotating assembly weight. So that's your piston, your wrist pin, your clips, and the upper half of your rod. That's reciprocating mass. And then the lower half of your rod and your crank is your rotating mass. So there's a ratio a number I like to work with in there. And then there's a total weight of your crankshaft. So what I really work on with the engines is getting the crankshaft weight to where I want, and then getting my balancing ratio between my rotating assembly and my reciprocating assembly and my rotating assembly. So all engine modifiers like to work with different numbers. But I have numbers I like to work with, like even total crank weight. Like if you have a crankshaft, I'll just give you an example that's under 38 grams, you're going to have flame out issues with that crankshaft because it's just too light. When you come off power, it's going to want to shut off on you. So there is a number you want to try to keep your total weight of your crank, and then you get your piston weight. So on my engines I lighten the piston, I lighten the rod, and I lighten the crank. I get a better ratio between that reciprocating and rotating weight. So.
Yeah, I remember you doing that all in your latest engine, right? You have everything's lightened on it.
So years ago, I bought what's a Honeywell Vibrex 2000 turbine balancer. I got FAA certified for this. I don't even want to say how much it cost, but this is when I was doing all the OS engines. I really wanted to improve my product and make sure I was giving people the best product I could offer them. I mean, they're paying money for my product. I felt honored. So I bought this balancing machine. I set it all up, and I'm testing the balancing of these engines. I'm really fine-tuning everything. And it really taught me a lot, to the point that when I talked to some factories, they told me they didn't even understand the balancing aspect of the engine. Because, at idle, if you were to put a transducer on the engine and say, where do I need to add weight to get this balanced in? Because a single-cylinder engine, you can never perfectly balance. There's no two opposing pistons, so you're only working within an RPM range. So at idle, at that RPM range, where do you need to add weight to have a perfect balance? It tells you up by the crank pin. As RPM increases, that shifts on a clock face to say 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, depending on what RPM range you're looking to balance that within. So it really helped me dial that in to say, okay, I want this engine balanced between 19,000 to 32,000. I want it to be smooth and accelerate quick. And you could actually place that carbide tungsten weight exactly where you want it on the crankcase. So
awesome.
So Ed, super technical section. That was great though. Kevin just definitely dove deep. Little rabbit chasing him right behind.
Hey, so if you bring up the picture of the dyno, though, I would like to just point out some anatomy of the dyno so people understand. I built this whole dyno. I machined all the parts. So
you got it, Toby? I can put it.
So which version is this? Because I know you've made a bunch of these over the years, right?
So this is the version I use right now. This is the current one, and I just took this picture today. It's got actually Greg Harmer's Flashpoint engine on it. I was heat cycling today. So number one is the RPM sensor for the engine, because it's a direct drive. There's no clutch on this dyno. The engine is directly driven to the spur gear, so there's no clutch slippage to be calculated into it. And then number two is the photocell RPM gauge for the inertia wheel, the flywheel of the weight that we're actually spinning up. So basically, I can monitor the RPM differences between those 2 points and make sure there's no slippage in the one-way bearing. So there's a one-way bearing in that number 2 slot. So when the engine revs up, when you let off the throttle, it comes right down to idle. So it doesn't run on. You don't want it to pull the engine on. But and then what you want to look at is number 3 is actually the thermocoupler I have set up to the carburetor. That's where I monitor carburetor temperature when I'm dynoing the engine. Because I use the heater on the dyno, I make sure that the carburetor's at temperature before I start recording runs. I mean, if the carburetor's 90 degrees, the tune's not going to be the same as when it's at operating temperature. Number 4 is the actual engine mount temperature. So I also monitor the engine mount temperature to know that I have full heat saturation of the engine before I actually dyno test anything. I want to make sure all these numbers are pretty consistent when I'm doing any type of comparison testing. And then, of course, number 5 is the engine temperature that I monitor at the same time. And then if I'm trying to diagnose a problem or something, I'll throw my exhaust gas temperature probe on there. I have a header with a fitting for that as well, but I don't always use that. That's only if it's a problematic engine. So. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the actual computer screen. I use Performance Trends data acquisition software. So you can see there, like, humidity, barometric pressure, air temperature, all that's calculated in. There's a weather station built into the actual box that I have mounted next to the dyno that samples the air in the room and corrects everything over to SAE correction. So whether I run an engine now in the winter or in the middle of the summer, those numbers are actually comparable because it's correcting over, calculating in all those weather conditions, which are the big 3 things: air temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. Really affect your power of your engine.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I would love to do more. Like I get so busy. It's like I want to do so much, and I get so excited, and I love this stuff. I wish I could. I want to have like a camera in here every day just so people see me run the engines every day and like everything I do. But it's hard.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, a couple things.
YouTube
If
Live.
I need something on one of my motors, I'm going to ship it to you. And
I appreciate that. Thank you. Something else I would like to talk to you about before we get off here, because I know I'm taking up a lot of time here and you guys got a lot to get to, but is fuel storage and practices. Your fuel, like something you're going to see me do at the track all the time with my fuel, is I never have it in direct sunlight. If I have it on my pit table and the sun's hitting it, I put it behind my pit bag. I cover it up. You want to keep it out of direct sunlight, even your pit bottle. Don't suck old fuel out of your fuel tank and put it back into your fuel bottle to try to save fuel. That's very bad to do. That fuel in your fuel tank has spent oils and stuff mixed into it. It's already been heated up. You're just contaminating your good fuel with that. And whenever you're possible, store your fuel in a temperature-controlled room. I mean, fuel, without extreme temperatures, cold or hot, it'll last a really long time. So
Ed, speaking about fuel, right? So what's the fuel preference, right? You got Sidewinder and you got 10 other fuel blends out there. What's the fuel blend of your choice?
So I'm sponsored by Nitro Pro. I really love the Nitro Pro fuel. I've had great results with it on the dyno and stuff. But I mean, VP Racing Fuels, all their fuel's great. I haven't ran any bad fuel, and I bought a lot of fuel. I have even Nitrotane up here. But me personally, I run VP Nitro Pro fuel. So the 28% nitro, and it runs great. It runs clean. You pop your head off of it. You look at your piston top. It looks really good inside.
Sweet.
This is why one thing I will say though about the fuel that it's in metal cans. I think it's more important to store in a temperature-controlled environment than fuel that has in a plastic bottle. You might get more moisture in your fuel from condensation in a metal can if it has high temperature swings. So just something to look out for. Reading your glow plug is really important. You can really see that if you actually pull your glow plug out, take a jeweler's loupe, and look at it. You can see fuel contamination that way.
Ed, it's quite obvious the passion that you have for the hobby, right? You are, you're like us, ultimately, right? We wouldn't be here unless we all had passions for the hobby. That's to say the least. Whether it's a passion to race, passion to wrench, passion to be a manager of a race team, passion to, manage our kids that are out there that we're trying to, see grow through the hobby, run a track, run a media company for RC, or just be like, the wizard of everything that's possibly knowledgeable in RC. That's Kevin Winters down below. But nonetheless, having somebody like you on here is, invaluable to all of the guys that are in our hobby in the tri-state in the Northeast that are watching the podcast. I've learned a lot just in these segments that you provided for us, to say the least. I even actually had a compliment from my buddy Tom Petrella about some of the questions I asked. So, ultimately I've been around and I always pay attention. It's just not my forte. It doesn't mean it won't happen in the future, but I love engines and I love cars. Just that portion of the hobby just really hasn't worked for me. I have one other question that I'd like to ask you before we depart. Before I do, number one, it's not departing. We're going to cover some other topics before we finish up the podcast tonight. We definitely love for you to hang around, so don't feel as if you're getting booted out of here. We're going to talk about some chassis discussion. The season's opening up, so we just kind of want to cover some of that. And Vinny also has a topic of tech tuning that he's going to wrap up with. Before I ask my last question, Toby, you've been real quiet for a while, so I wanted to see if you have another question.
No, I think I'm good. The couple I asked were ones that immediately came to mind. So, it's all very impressive stuff, So, yeah, I'm good.
Cool. Vinny, you got a question?
No, actually, all my questions were covered. You guys did a great job of doing that. So, yeah, thanks, Ed, for coming on. It's been a lot of great info. Appreciate it, man.
It's my honor, really, it is. So,
by the way, Vinny, thank you for bringing Ed on. We should make that connection here. So I really appreciate that. Tom, you got any other questions?
I hate to say it, but I do. One quick one, because I struggle with it. And you said something before about fuel mileage and low speed needle.
Mr. Time Clock.
I know, but just give me if you can, in 90 seconds, suggestions on low speed needle tuning. How are you doing that? Any recommendations? And I'm going to consider, I'm new to Nitro still, so I'd be curious if you can give me some insights. Like my order of operations, you always go high speed first, try to get that close, and then work to the low speed. I'd be curious your thoughts.
Yeah, well, the high speed is that high speed, wide open throttle down the straightaway, tune it until it screams. Your low speed needle really works in conjunction with your idle. So sometimes people think they have a lean bottom end, but it's actually just a lean idle circuit. So they're still fat, but they have just a lot of air coming on the idle. So basically, I like to run the bottom end as lean as I can with the idle. I know you're not going to be able to tell this by actual track, but it's about 6,000 RPMs is a good idle for the engine. So if you set your idle gap at about 1 millimeter, 1.2 millimeter, or actually right about 1 millimeter, it gives you a good starting point. You can back it down a little bit if you need. You'll actually, as you close your idle gap, shut your air off, you'll be leaning out your bottom to shut your fuel off. You'll be balancing those out. But yeah, so your low speed needle, you're on more on the track. So that's where your transition's at. That's where your runtime comes from there. So the closer that is to tune, the better runtime you'll get. So, awesome. But your idle and your low speed work together. So that's why the best time to tune your engine is when you come in after a qualifier, after your 5-minute tank practice or whatever. You should pull into pit row. It should idle. It shouldn't stall out. It shouldn't drop. It shouldn't two-stage. It should come in and perfectly idle for you. If it's two-staging, you're going to lean out your bottom and lower your idle gap, and it should be perfect.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, the two-stage idle was a massive affliction that most people seem to suffer from, myself included. But I've learned more this past year about that.
Just tune your engine to where you're happy, and don't. If you go to start it up the next time and it sounds a little weird, don't worry about what it sounds like when it's cold. It's what it really sounds like when it's up to operating temperature and you're on the track. Set that final tune, and, when you're practicing or at the end of your qualifier, ask your pit guy, hey, how does it sound? Oh, it's purring like a kitten, or it's got a high idle. Okay, back the idle down a little bit, or lean out the bottom, or it's two-staging. That's the best time to actually throw the fine tune on your engine is after it's fully operational. All the temperatures are up to temp. So heat saturation.
Now the questions are coming. What do you think to JQ's whole method of tuning an engine? You know, by just setting the idle gap and then tuning from there, not touching the idle.
Yeah. No, his video is awesome. You're gonna have to adjust your idle gap a little bit, but that's absolutely a great technique. Is because if you have a really high idle gap, you're gonna have a really rich bottom end, and you're gonna be chasing it.
Yeah.
So know where your idle gap set that, adjust your low speed to get where you want, and then if it's running on at the end of a straightaway or whatever, you're gonna close your idle gap a little bit, lean out your bottom end a little bit. They all work in conjunction with each other. Especially if you're getting run on. Usually run on after a high speed run is a high idle gap. So you're going to close that idle gap, lean out your bottom end.
All right, Ed. So it's the spring, right? It's opening day.
I got my spot at LCRC today.
All right. So
Good. I'll be tapping on
40
the shoulder,
degrees.
helping my motor.
Hold on. It's opening day. It's 40 degrees. Getting our pits ready to go, right? Sun comes out, warms up to like, I don't know, lower 50s. The sun's out. Half the day goes by. They reorganize. They put the main list up. Next thing you know, a cold front comes through. Temperature drops 20 degrees. And now there's precipitation in the forecast. So the one thing I heard you say earlier is that don't touch your engine. Don't measure by temperature, right? It's just only if there's a drastic difference in an environment, which would be temperature, right? Or humidity level. So I just gave you a prime example for somebody who doesn't know shit. He's a new guy at the track, shows up at LCRC, dumps $2,500 into radios and motors and fuel and chassis, shows up with his new rental trailer and his hand washer and his grill and his frisbee because he wants to play, and he's pitting near Tom Petrella. What does the guy do when the weather changes and he's running Nitro?
Start it up, run it, see how it sounds at the end of your qualifier, because more than likely, it's not just the temperature that's going to change your tune. It's
No. The qualifiers already happened. So now it's between qualifiers and the main, and the weather's changed drastically. What's a guy like Tom Petrella do? New to Nitro. Does he leave it the way it was? He starts it up to the pit, hears it.
Leave it the way it was, because there's three factors that you got to figure into. You might feel personally on your body the temperature change. You might feel the moisture come up in the air a little bit. But what's the barometric pressure? Like, it's those air temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure, all three of those combined that really affect the tune. So even though the temperature might change, something else might have changed. And this is a weather station I have here. I take this to the track all the time, but don't really have to use it all the time. And it gives you what's called an ADR. It's an air density ratio gauge. So it takes all three of those variables into calculation and it gives you one number to work off, a 70 to 130 scale. And it takes, for it to justify an hour change on your needle, it takes like a 10% change on your ADR to calculate that. And the temperature of the air can change 10 degrees, but that's not a 10% change because the humidity might have came up and the barometric pressure might have did something, and your ADR is actually only like 2% different than what it was in the morning or in the evening. You know, so it's not just the one factor that you got to think about air temperature. It's all three that go in together. So.
Hey, Ed, you should put that product on your website.
Well, I bought this from Jags years ago. It's for Summit, maybe Summit Racing. It's for
Kevin Winters going to have one in his trailer.
But really, like what I would recommend for Tom is don't touch the tune, start it up, let everything, because it might be cooler a little bit outside. It might take a little bit longer for everything to heat saturate. You know, give it time to get up to temperature, operating temperature, and see how it sounds. I mean, I don't think it's going to like justify a huge drastic change in the tune, and I think you it'll be more consistent that way. You know, because if you say, oh, I'm going to rich it up because it's cooler, but it may not actually need to be riching up, and now you're running a fat engine. So.
Sweet. I just figured logical question based on what I heard through this, whole segment. So I really appreciate your response.
All right.
Anybody else got anything else for Ed before we just ask him to hang in there and we start to cover some of the other topics? All right, perfect. We got an hour and 15 in, so trying to keep the wheel rolling. Vinny, it's up to you, man. Last time you got rushed, you had a lot of important stuff to cover. So if you're prepped and you want to go now, then that way we can cover the chassis stuff and limit it to our discussion, make it a part A, part B. I think the chassis discussion can most definitely be a two-part. It doesn't need to be finished this time around. Plus, everybody will start, just saying what they like better ultimately with chassis. So, you comfortable? You want to roll now or you want to roll later?
We can roll later. I'm fine. Either way, whatever you guys want to do, just let me know. I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, why don't you go now? So
Okay.
that way, because last time you got really rushed and your segment's important, and this other part we can do in two parts.
Okay, right on. Well, tonight for episode 15, we're going to talk about roll bars, or anti-roll bars. And roll bars are a very important change that affects the lateral grip and the roll. So we want to, usually one of the first things we change when going to a new track or layout is going to be your roll bars, and dependent on grip. So in order to achieve proper roll balance, we need to load the tires evenly. So, and I'll get into that in a minute, but we need to load them as equally as possible. And this is going to help us maximize corner speed. All right. Ultimately, that's what we want. So understanding balance a little bit. When the car is understeering on low grip, first we're going to try, maybe a softer front bar. If we're understeering on high grip, we're going to try a stiffer rear bar first and then try the softer. Otherwise, you're always going to want to change your roll bars together, so front and rear. But understanding the balance is key. So oversteering on a low grip track, you want to start with a stiffer front. Oversteering on a high grip track, you want to start with a softer rear bar, and then if that doesn't work, you can add on with a stiffer front. So having said that, generally speaking, with the roll bars, a stiffer setup is going to give you more initial grip and less chassis roll. And what that means, it's going to be better on entry and on exit, but you're going to give up a little bit of that mid-corner grip. This may also, an important part of that is that this may also raise the chassis. Like, for example, if you have a higher roll center and maybe you're on stiffer springs, it's going to actually push the chassis up a little bit. So a lot of times you want to lower that roll center and try and soften up those springs, especially if it's a bumpier track. So a softer setup is going to give you more chassis roll. You're going to have less initial grip because it's going to roll through the corner, but it's going to essentially give you more mid-corner grip, essentially possibly giving you more corner speed. So definitely worth a try. That softer setup is going to keep the chassis lower, like I said, with the lower roll center, softer springs, and maybe even thicker. For example, if you're running carpet, 10 scale carpet, this is kind of the setup you want. That's a setup where the tires can't really slide. There's so much grip. It's so high grip that it's not going to slide. It's going to catch and it's going to traction roll. So if that's the case, you actually want to sometimes soften it up, believe it or not. A lot of people think, oh, you got to stiffen it up and then try and get it to slide, and it's just not fast. You want to soften it up, believe it or not. A lot of times, even the glued surfaces, Astro, carpet, they have so much grip that this is, the only way to set up your car and make it go fast. So generally speaking, now talking about front, rear, everything, when the front is stiffer, you're going to see less roll. Okay. On high grip, this can make the car harder to drive. It's because it's more responsive. So you're going to get more feedback from the front end. So you're going to want to soften it up. So if you're softening up the front end, you're going to find that you have more off power steering, let's say going into the corner, and the tires are more evenly loaded. So that's going to give you more mid corner grip. And you might sacrifice a little bit of rear grip in the process. The car, you want to make sure that it's not so soft that the car is three-wheeling through the corner. And if it is three-wheeling through the corner, you can even try softening up the rear end. If it's three-wheeling, the rear might be too stiff. So you want to plant that rear, you want to soften it up, you want to keep it in the track, low roll center, and with your stiffer oil package, and maybe softer springs can help as well. But you don't want it three-wheeling. The stiffer rear end is going to give you more on-power steering and corner entry. But if it's not working for you, then you need to go softer on the rear, which is going to give you more overall grip, less corner entry, less corner entry and exit stability, but it's going to give you that mid-corner grip that you're looking for. So it doesn't spin out mid-corner. One of the things that you can also try if you're spinning out mid-corner is adjusting your camber a little bit. Sometimes you take a little bit of camber out, and that's all it takes mid-corner to get it to hook up a little bit better as well. So I hope that helped you guys. Go ahead.
Why is that, Vinny? The camber, that is. Less contact patch, more.
A while ago, we talked about roll center and how when you go through the corner, you depending on where your linkage is set, you're either going to have more camber gain or less camber gain. So what's happening is a lot of times is that you're getting suspension to a certain point where it's losing contact patch because it's got too much camber, let's say. So you're not utilizing all your tire. So if you make that slight camber change, a lot of times it'll get back towards the edge of the tire and on more contact patch, and you're going to have more mid-corner grip that way. These are essential things for making good corner speed through the corner. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up.
Awesome, man. It's important. Roll bars are like, one of the first go-to, right?
It is absolutely that. The springs, and yeah, we're going to start getting more and more into suspension. We're going to start talking about suspension.
Yeah,
I love Benny's segment.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it, buddy.
Most guys, like when they're racing, right? Especially when they're newer to racing, they're just trying to keep their car in the line, right? Or trying to keep the car in the middle of the track, not at the pipe, don't crash, don't marshal. But as you progress with your racing, right, you try to, things kind of slow down. And during the process of it slowing down, you're focusing on your car and you're seeing the way your car behaves. You don't really get an opportunity to see the way it behaves perfectly all the way around the track, because obviously some vantage points are farther away. We can only see so far 100 feet away from us, or, in certain detail. But when the car is coming around, let's say the straightaway, the last turn coming into the straightaway, maybe the last turn heading out of the straightaway, and maybe the infield, right? You see the car in certain positions where you might see a back wheel lift up, or you might see a front wheel lift up. And then, hey, maybe I can change the sway bar, go to a spring, get the car to settle down, right? All four tires on the ground is the fastest car, whether it's, coming off a jump or going around the turn.
Absolutely right. You know what? Your needs might change. Once you're on that middle of the track, like you said, you're in the groove. It's the A main. Now you're making it to the A main, let's say at LCRC. It's a different track than what everybody else ran on. And now the track might be a little bit bumpier. It might have some holes in it, but there's definitely a groove and there's more grip. So you might need a little bit more. I mean, these guys are going fast. So I know like Aiden is going to want a stiffer rear sway bar. We might even change his roll center in the rear. We might even stick with the softer rear sway bar and just move the arms back and move the hubs back, and let it soak up the bumps a little bit better for the main instead of changing a couple other things. So there's a lot of variables that go through. And as you progress through your skills, you're going to realize that you need more things out of the car. And then your setup is going to change along with that. So that's why we always put our setups on dialed. And we're able to then look and see, all right, what did we do last time? And it's most of it's public. I know all my stuff is public. The boys have a lot of their setups are public, so you guys can check it out. But basically, whatever we ran there last time is what we're going to record in there. We're going to save it, and then we can just go look at it right on our app and see where we're at and what do we want to try differently based on our results from last time and the conditions of the track this time.
I think that's a perfect topic for next time around, Vin. Our movement for bumpy tracks, how to make a car easy to drive versus a car that is looking for mechanical traction, as an example.
Right on. There are a lot of really good videos already. Ryan Lutz has an amazing video on that already. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
I think sometimes with the roll bars is your first instinct is almost opposite to what needs to be done. Right. So like right, Tom? Right. So like you
I've
can
done
see
it.
the car behave, right? And you're like, oh, I think I need a stiffer rear sway bar, when ultimately it's potentially you need a softer front versus a stiffer rear, or inverse, depending on what's going on. But sometimes it's it's one thing that's always crazy about car setup, and that's why you got to read these manuals over and over again, unless you're dealing with it on a daily basis. Is to basically understand the mechanics of what's going on. It's so easy to get confused. Anyway, Ed, by the way, I just want to say thank you very much for the great information that you brought to the podcast on the engine category. We kind of went into Vinny's segment really quick. I didn't get a chance to say thank you appropriately. So really appreciate all that valuable knowledge that you brought to it. We are going to move forward quickly. We got about 20 minutes left to basically just cover some chassis conversation. So Tom Petrella had brought up, over the last few weeks, we do interviews with, average Joes to local pros, as well as anybody else that's in the industry that can bring some value, from ambassadors to manufacturers to engine mod guys like yourself. So what we wanted to talk about was basically chassis, right? We've all, as individual racers, have all run different platforms. I would say probably the two guys here that have run more platforms than the rest of us combined would be Toby and Kevin by far. But everybody has their preference, at least right now. But everybody has a little bit of a story based on what chassis they've run in the past, whether it was version 1 or version 3 of that chassis. So we were just going to kick it off like that. So with that being said, Toby, what was since you've spoke the least, as usual, whether it was first chassis you started with or the chassis that you've gone through, give us a little, just brief story on where you've been, where you've come, which one you like, and which one, why you're running what you are now.
Yeah, I guess I started out with Associated, the old-fashioned original RCA. And then went to the
original RCA was a C-Hub, was it not?
Yes, it was. Kind of like a Kyosho looking front end. And I went actually, Techno used to do electric conversion. They had their own chassis plate with a motor mount, really short little rear dog bone. It was a really good conversion. And they actually even had like a brake servo in the rear of the car if you wanted it as an option, but they made the thing like a tank. But going from there, I went to Kyosho, MP9, which I think maybe back then, no, there wasn't actually any, I think there was an E-car. From there to Techno, and now back to Kyosho. I think that, if we're talking if we focus in this conversation on kind of recommendations or performance maybe, but I think I've always had kind of a soft spot for Techno in terms of their durability and ease of maintenance. So, I think anybody getting into the hobby, it's a great place to start. There's a ton of information out there. The cars, like I said, they're really easy to work on, set up. So, I'm not much of an e-buggy guy. That's how I started off in hobby, but I I kind of got addicted to Nitro. That's kind of where I'm at on the whole flashlight discussion.
Well, just to rewind,
Batteries are for flashlights.
Toby, I will say tonight, even with the short amount of time, probably the shortest amount of time that you've had to prepare, you're like most prepared.
I know, right?
It's amazing, bro. High five.
Hey.
But we got to rewind it a little bit. You didn't talk about anything related to the chassis. All you talked about is the different chassis that you ran. So out of all the different chassis that you run, other than switching cars to try a different one, did you find one that suited you better than the other one, or a car that you tend to have better results with than the others? And then we can just say, hey, it was that chassis as an example.
Right. I was really shocked when I went to the Techno EB 48.4 because that car was super goofy. It was like long, narrow, But I always did really well with it, which really pissed me off because I was just did better with that car than I did with Nitro. But I never really could get along with the 48, the newer car. I don't know. I just hated it. I don't know why. It just didn't jive with me. But I always seem to do better with those cars. I kind of they're very similar, C-Hub cars. Yeah, let's go. I guess they're very similar from like a setup standpoint. I've never really driven a pedalboard car, so.
You have a Mugen for?
Yeah, you had a Mugen.
Yeah, I did for like 5 seconds. I think I got the e-buggy for Motorama, but doing the video.
And maybe that's part of the conversation today, right? Is talk a little maybe C-Hub versus Pillow Ball, and then we get into more brands as we go too. I mean, George, I asked you guys to do this because I know a lot of new guys for Rhythm are trying to like, hey, what car do I get? And I love my HB, but it doesn't mean it's for everybody, and that's why I wanted to kind of pick this group's brain too.
I think a lot of people don't really understand kind of like the driving characteristics of pedalboard versus C-Hub. I mean, I tried to drive Kevin Muma's Nitro buggy Mugen, and I'm trying to drive it like a C-Hub, and then he went out and tried to drive my C-Hub like a Mugen, and he's like, this fucking car doesn't turn, because he was kind of going into the turn, and he's like, when's it going to turn? Whereas the Mugen just seemed to drive a lot differently, kind of going into the turns, the rear end would come around a lot, whereas the C-Hub, you kind of have to kind of like drive it into the turn. So it was pretty amusing at the time, but there's definitely a difference in both, the design and construction, but also I think how you drive it, and I don't think that's necessarily well understood.
There's actually a great JQ video out there. Kevin probably knows which one it is as I describe it. He'll find it and post it in the group. More than likely, that's what Kevin does. Thank God.
I think I sent it to you, right?
Let me describe it. I don't know. It wasn't recently. I just remember probably in the last 2 years, as this podcast was coming together, I was watching all those videos, watching Lefty, blah, blah, blah. There was this one JQ video that basically explained the difference between C-Hub and Pillow Ball. Not so much in the front of the car, but more about the rear end. So basically, I think, and I don't even want to speak about it because I don't want to get it wrong, but I think like a C-Hub car was always like its rear end was driving like up through the center, versus a C-Hub car always its ass always kind of wants to come around. Tom said to me in the quick channels we were going, mentioning the difference. I went from C-Hub to basically Pillow Ball this year. Since I'm next to the cube and I already started talking, I'll just summarize real quickly. When I started racing back in 2009, I basically started running TLR. I think it was probably the first A-scale buggy that they had out, which was the 8, right? So between that and the truck, never did well. I was a pretty good average racer, but I never found any good consistent, performance with that car for me. Then I ended up going to Techno when they released their first official buggy. Toby, which one was that? Did you say it was the 48 or it was the first official Techno e-buggy? Not a conversion kit, the first full platform.
That was like the 48 point.
48, right?
Yeah, AB 48. Yeah.
So we're racing at South Jersey as an example, the indoor Bill Surley's place. It was great. He chimed in recently, Tom, on your track. I saw that. That was great. Not only great to see him chime in, but to offer some assistance equipment. That was great. We had a lot of good times at his place. But when I ended up getting that Techno buggy going from the TLR buggy, I had built it, didn't even break it in, never ran it at the track before, but we had been running indoor at that time. I ended up running, built it, brought it that Sunday, ended up running it. The first heat that I ran, in the first heat I ran and I was up 1 lap from the previous weekend in the best times that I had ever done with my TLR car. So as an example right there, I was like, holy shit, this thing is like, amazing. And right there for the first time, because so many guys are brand allegiant, right? They never want to leave Team Associated or they never want to leave TLR for whatever reason. And I think that a lot of guys' limitations in the hobby is because they don't want to leave a platform. And ultimately, all these platforms, even though there's small nuances between all of them, I think those nuances actually suit everybody's driving style differently. And until you actually land into a platform that kind of fits you, you never realize your full driving potential, I believe, to a certain degree. So fast forward from there, I ended up going to HB. When I moved to HB, my times increased. That car, I thought, and still think to this day, only because I don't have enough time on my new chassis yet, I think that the HB 817, 819 platforms were bulletproof. Bulletproof. Even the 817 truck, bulletproof. I mean, when I finally got more comfortable driving in the last couple of years, really focused on principles, don't get marshaled, don't crash, etc., I could really feel like I could push that car really hard, like coming through certain sections, like I would be amazed as I'm squeezing, coming through sections going, wow, I mean, the car is still where it is. And now I knew I could hit that level and maybe push more. Whereas in the previous techno, like Toby was saying, it was a great little dart. That techno would go where you wanted it to, but it was so hard to just keep it in line. It felt like it was always dancing out of position. And even though it was great, my times picked up, I spent so much time trying to keep the ass in line. Whereas the HB always stayed in line and it always felt like it wanted more. It was a good warrior. That's the best way I'll surmise it. Now, switching from C-Hub, which I've run always in my RC racing kind of, club career, so to speak, has always been C-Hub. So now for the first time, I'm in a pillowball car, and I really started running in the fall and in Motorama, so I have 2 races under my belt. But the hardest thing that I find is, contrary to what you guys just said a few minutes ago, is I don't feel like the car gets in around the turn. I feel like I'm understeering going into the turn, and then I don't feel like I'm getting any rotation coming through it. So after Motorama, basically on the bench right now, I took my toe in the rear from 3 to 2. I even bought one of their optional plates, which gives you a half a degree, built in, so I can go to 2.5, 1.5, 3.5, etc. And then basically did some front end stuff, and I'm hoping to see how that difference might be because I'm not getting the car to rotate. So for right now, pillow ball, the vote's still out. I'm really encouraged. One thing I did see is that under rough driving conditions, the car seemed to handle better than the HB did in terms of, let's say high speed sweepers or really, really fast sections where it was bumpy. But I kind of got to see how it pans out. So that's my chassis experience for the last number of years. Over to you, Patrell. You're on mute.
Sorry, so that's works with DNC.
Yeah, I mean, they sweeped up, so it's obviously I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But the way that you said it, where you gave Kevin your car and vice versa, or Toby, whoever said that before, where everybody like kind of said to me, oh, it's going to steer like a monster through the turns and everything. Like on the rough, I feel it and notice it already. But I'm more of a point and shoot guy. So if you're not like carrying a lot of speed through the turn and really like whipping it and letting it hang out, I find that it was hard to point and shoot, get into the turn really tight, and then get around the turn tight and keep going. Like if I didn't keep up, like if I didn't stay on throttle hard coming through the turn, the car wanted to understeer versus oversteer. And I got to find that happy medium because it was driving me crazy. And like so many guys were getting underneath me. And it's either I have to stay more on power, whereas as a C-Hub, you could fly into a corner, point and shoot, slow down, get around the turn nice and tight without being on excessive power, and then get on power again. So it's kind of like finding that happy medium.
Ed, what chassis do you run?
Ed, that question was for you.
Sorry, Ed. Yeah, Ed, what chassis do you run?
I run the hot bodies. I actually have the old version, and I have a new buggy here that I built. I haven't even run yet. So I love the hot bodies. I mean, I don't know. It's been a good car for me. So I do like the Techno, though. The Techno looks really nice out there. Greg Harmer makes it look really good. Even the Sparko, the Sparko car looks good. Kevin's got that looking good. Yeah. But I personally prefer C-Hub front end. So.
And why?
I like the way it steers off power. and then I dial in the on power steering as I need it. Pillow ball seems to require a little bit more throttle input, and I'm not that precise, I think, to be fast with a pillow ball.
Is that what they call dry steering the car with the rear end? Is that, I mean, technically what we're kind of talking about? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I like the feel of the kind of rear end kind of drive in it. So, but I don't know. I love the hot bodies. It reminds me of the old Losi 2.0, the original Losi 8. You know, I love that car. It had plenty of steering. It was fast. You know, and that's what the hot bodies reminds me of. So,
The absolute hobby sweatshirt has nothing to do with it.
Well, I used to work at Trinity Racing with Chad Phillips, so me and Chad are really good friends.
It's all good, man. I'm just busting. Kevin, we can take you last because you run 8-9 chassis. Vinny, what about you?
Toby's got me beat by far.
He's the Sparko king. He made Sparko. Nobody knew about that until Kevin Winters.
True.
He needs more
video.
He needs more credit for that.
Yeah.
did a great job.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.
Appreciate it.
So yeah, I think I've run every chassis out there at some point. It started with the Tamiya when I was a little kid, a Fox, and then I've dabbled with Kyosho and Team Losi for a little while. With their, I had the JRX Pro, the JRXT, and I remember racing at the 4-H fair with that when I was a kid. And yeah, I've tried X-Ray for 10 scale. For 8 scale, I remember running Durango. I don't know if Toby, if you ran Durango too on 8 scale. Yeah.
Toby, come on.
Got one over there.
Yeah.
Toby was like,
Actually,
Don't make me go get it.
it
You
was
left that off the list.
to get certain parts for, but that
Go
car
get
was
it, Toby.
awesome. It really was a great car. So I love that. I had that in the Truggy. I raced that locally for a little while. And then once I got on the switch back and forth was associated, I had the original RC8 as well. And I was just, club racing for fun at that point. I tried Durango and then couldn't find parts, went back to AE, and then kind of never looked back, started seeing success there and figuring out the car and setup and all that good stuff. And so for me, the whole chassis thing, I got to say, guys, they're all good in their own way. You have to go with what suits you best, number one. You have to go with where you're going to get that information you're looking for. Like, let's face it, you get into the hobby and really there's a lot to know. There's a lot to learn. So how are you going to learn this information? You have different avenues. So I know for Team Associated, we have a lot of ambassadors. Like, for example, Spencer Rifkin, as everybody knows, he's got videos that he drops every month. And he's talking about all the chassis, 10 scale and 8 scale. He's going over what he's tried. There's the dingo.
Yes. Dingo.
Wow.
Shiny and new.
Right on. Looking good.
That's your
Let's
Ryan
ran
Lutz
that.
remake, right?
For a while, I think JQ was offering money for those, right?
Yeah, he and then he drove over them like a steamroller or
Oh
something.
my God.
That's nuts.
brutal.
So yeah, the chassis is like, where are you going to get the information from, and that's one of the reasons why I like putting setups on So Dialed, so that and for every track that we go to, so that you can see what's working for us and what's different on your car. By inputting it into that same app, you can actually overlay our setup onto yours and see, okay, what's Aiden doing that I'm not doing, and what's Dylan doing? Maybe Dylan's setup is a little easier to drive. Let me try what he's got. And you can just try different things that the team has already on there. So for me, that accessibility to information and knowledge, I think that should ultimately be a deciding factor for the new guy getting into the hobby, is how to get that information. But if they're smart enough to be listening to the podcast and hearing this discussion, they should be leaving with some good info and knowing where they want to be. Everyone's got their brands that they love, so we need to embrace that.
Sweet. Tom Petrella.
No, I mean, look, I'll put the disclosure out there. Right? I've been running the HB car for a while. I really like the HB car. One thing, just a quick build on what Vin was saying. Be sure there's parts support too. That's one of the things I try to talk to people about it. Part support is critical. And some brands have much better support than others. Whether it's your fellow racers or your local hobby shops. Look, my experience is minimal, and that's really why I wanted to drive this conversation with you guys. I think you guys have more experience than I do. My last car before my HB that I've been running now for 3 or 4 years was the Associated 3.2. And while I never turned faster laps in any car than that car was fast, I had a very difficult time being consistent with it. Was it the car? Was it my racecraft? A little bit of both, maybe. And speaking to Brett Butter, big Associated guy, he's like, man, the new cars have gotten a lot better. Where some of the shortcomings the old car had, they've really addressed. And again, I was driving a 2-generation old Associated, so my experience is minimum. But I have to say the HB stuff for me is good. What I like in a car is I want my car loose. I want a ton of steering off power. So I want to get into the turn off power, get the car to get its rotation and get back on it. And I want it to square up and go. I don't want to get on throttle. I feel like I have more control with my steering hand than I do with my throttle hand, maybe because I'm right-handed, that if I get on throttle, I don't want the car to step out on me. And that's what I try to avoid. Now, is it necessarily the fastest way around the track? Maybe not. But for someone at my skill level, I need something that I can be more consistent with, because consistency is always going to be faster than speed at my level. When you're getting to the pros, they can will the car if it's not perfect. Me, I need the car to be right so I don't wreck too much.
Tom's fast. Don't let him.
Yeah, he's bullshit.
I know.
Yeah.
Sandbagger.
2 cars,
It must be the car then.
3 million laps.
Touching on what Tom was talking about is the fact that I can reach out to, for example, Kurt Wenger, who you guys know I've said before has helped me tremendously, and get feedback and set up feedback and even shock information. It's pretty awesome having that support, and then the parts on top of that. Being able to find parts wherever you go, it definitely makes it a lot easier. For the newer racer to get out there and get that information. It's all about getting that information, that knowledge, because all these cars, like for example, Tom, from what you're saying, you want a car that is a little more locked in the rear. So you're going to want a softer rear end. You don't want that really aggressive rear end. You want it to plant on power. So I'm thinking like a thicker rear diff and a lower rear roll center, a slightly softer sway bar with maybe a little bit longer of a chassis to soak up those bumps on power. That's going to be your go-to, and play around with your camber gain from there, and your tire selection, of course. So, softer setup for you would probably be, better. And you can achieve that on all these platforms. It's
Exactly.
about knowing what you want, and then a little bit of brand loyalty goes a long way. That's one thing about, the brand I run for is that, we've been with them a long time. So I kind of know the chassis pretty well. So it definitely gives us an advantage, not having to learn a chassis every year is, that takes a lot out of you, where you could be building on the existing chassis that you're running, should you have a little brand loyalty. So, yeah.
Not good points.
All right, well, we're going to finish it up with Kev, and then I thought of something fun that we'll do at the tail end, which is ask like a couple basic questions, and we'll kind of raise our hands, like which car is the most durable? Take a vote. Which car is the easiest to drive? Take a vote. Which car lasts getting abused the most? Take a vote. Kev, go ahead.
Whatever one
All right.
George is driving.
So I pretty much started off with TLR. I used like the 3.0 and the 4.0 buggies and the truggies. Ran those for a while. Then I switched HB, the 817 car, 819s. Ran those for a long time. And then switched to the Sparco car. And I really like the Sparco car. But I really like the HB car too. I really like the 817 car a lot, 817 V2. Was really comfortable with those cars, C-Hub front end. The Sparco is like similar front end. So I was really comfortable with that right off the bat, But yeah.
All right, so all I'm hearing is you're comfortable on both. Anyone you like more than the other?
I mean, with cars, it's always a give and a take thing. Like you might like something with this car or that car, you know. And I have a Techno Truggy too, so I messed around with that before, compared to the HB Truggy. And pretty much, you know, like they're all good, you know, like every car has pretty good, you know, certain things are better with others, and then, you know, certain things you might not like on this car than you like on this car. So yeah.
Well, I think in general, right? If you look at this panel, we got Toby's a C hub, Petrella's a C hub, you're a C hub, and you're a C hub down there, Ed. And then we just got two pillow ball guys here. We got one experience and one who doesn't know shit from Shinola is trying to figure it out. But
hey, real quick, I used to run pillow ball. I used to have the original Thunder Tiger EB4 back in the day, the EB4, the EB4S2. So, yeah, I just prefer C hub. I like the off power steering that I get. So,
I do think that you could achieve a lot of different front ends with a C hub car though. Like HB, like the 817 stuff. I mean, you had 3 different caster blocks, and then you had, you know, different KPI knuckles. And I think that you were able to achieve a lot of different front ends with that car and make it work for a lot of different people. I mean, maybe a pillow ball guy, if they went to an HB and they went with a 4 or a 6 KPI knuckle, they might be more comfortable and, you know, might feel similar to them, you know. So I do think with a C-Hub car, you can achieve a lot of front ends if they have the options. Like certain companies have more options than others. Like I think pretty much Kyosho is just, you know, like 0 KPI, but they have a lot of different caster blocks, so you can tune the front end that way. But like a pillow ball car, you can move the front arm back and forth and achieve different caster, you know. So
quick.
Yeah, very quick for sure. So, but for me, I like the, you know, a lot of entry steering. Usually like a 0 KPI knuckle or spindle, whatever you call it. That's generally what I like on a buggy. So like the 817 cars and the 819 car was a 0 KPI spindle in the front, and the RS buggy was a 2, and the Spark was a 0. So judging from you know, the front end, it's kind of a similar feel. So for me, like that's one thing I looked at on the car before I got it, and I'm like, I think I would be comfortable with this car, and you know, I felt comfortable right away with it. So I really enjoy it, you know. And for me, like the pillow ball feel, I don't like it as much, but I haven't really had one, so I haven't really put the time into doing that. I've just driven other people's. Some other people's cars did feel really good, you know. So I'm sure with any kind of time on a, you know, a pillow ball car, I'm sure I could get it to work for me, you know. But I pretty much stuck to the C-Hub because, you know, that's what I felt comfortable with. And I kind of drive like get into the corner tight like you, George, and you know, I like the rear end grippy and the front end like really aggressive, like a lot of steering. And then on exit, I kind of don't like a lot of exit steering almost. So I could just hammer on the throttle and the car will just square up straight and go. So that's kind of how I like my car. And the Sparko works great like that. So yeah. And then like the Techno Truggy, it actually has a 5 KPI front end. I think that's what it is, 5 KPI. And I actually like the KPI on the Techno Truggy. So, I mean, it's a give and a take. Sometimes a different car, the front end is a lot different. Like, you know, this C-Hub might be a lot different than this C-Hub, you know. And the steering radius is a lot different on different cars. So, sometimes certain things suit you better with this car or that car, and the same setup doesn't always apply. I mean, I know like a lot of the guys with the HB car, they switched to the newer car, then a lot of them found out they couldn't run the same setup as before, and they had to change their setup. So for sure, different car. Sometimes it's the same brand, but from one model to one model might be a huge difference. For sure.
Well, I think in a future episode, Vin, there's a lot of discussion on KPI, right? For those people that are running C-Hub. So I think that's definitely something that could be, its own little discussion and segment later. It's funny, Kevin and I were talking earlier in the week on the side channel chat. We were having this discussion about KPI and, different products. And I said to him, being new to Pillowball, I know I don't have a Kingpin incline pin because I don't have C-Hub. But I was wondering whether or not the Pillowball had some type of pre-built incline that was relative to Kingpin. Kevin said no, of course. But nonetheless.
Is the AE, I heard the AE is equal to 8 KPI. Is that true, Vin? Or do you know? Or
I don't know because I can't really adjust the KPI. It's kind of set with the front hubs.
Right.
So like on a Pillowball, actually building a set right now, but you can see this is like the truggy front end, and you have a set location. So really, moving this top Pillowball back a little bit is going to change the inclination a little bit. So you'd have to change the mold, and then you change the arms. So you're talking about a lot. Whereas one of the big changes that we made going to the B4 was that we did change the KPI. We made it so that the car was a little bit less aggressive, and taking feedback like what Tom was saying about the 3.2. So going to the 4, we made the car a little bit less aggressive, but it's not hard to go ahead and make the car aggressive again, let's say using the rear end, and then obviously, with the weight balance changes that we made, we're now able to run softer springs on the front end. And I think right now that mixed with a lot of the testing the team just did with, and it's one of the things that, I worked on a lot, and to find out they were already working on it. And I thought, I was the innovator, but we basically, we went from, LTC rear diffs back to HTC, which is the more locking, the bigger gears, and that made a big difference in the car, because those diffs want to kind of lock up on power, and running the LTC in the front and the HTC in the rear almost made it like a real race car, where you have more of a locking diff in the rear, and then a diff that spins a little bit more freely in the front, allowing the car to rotate really, really well, and really be fast on corner speed in that inside line. So I think right now our chassis, the improvements that were just made, like let's say right before DNC and the testing that like Brent Telke and Kurt Wenger did, the car is on a different level right now. I'm excited for PMB.
Sweet. All right, Toby, you had disappeared for a minute, so we're going to close this baby up. Before I do, best car for a basher into A-scale racing, durability. Anyone?
Techno.
Techno. I keep going on mute.
All right, there we go. Let's see. Best car for parts availability in these days.
Associated.
Okay. Best car to finish an actual race with.
Techno.
HB.
All right. Best car for wrenching.
Techno again.
Not HB.
Need a lot of parts.
That's it. Let's see. Who else has got a good one in regards to car? I've shot my shotgun load. Come on. One last good question. Anyone? Come on, Kevin. All right.
I'm trying to think of something.
I ain't going to stress it out too much. This was episode 15 with Ed Bridges, Northeast RC Racer Podcast. Ed, again, super pleasure. A lot of information for Nitro Motors. We would love to have you back, right? It's a long season, so I don't see any reason why we couldn't invite you back here, right? Mid-season, give some guys some extra tuning advice. Hopefully, we'll see you at the track racing at some point. If you guys haven't seen or don't know, there's Ed's website address that's at the bottom of our screen right now, so check him out. He said he was working on Greg Harmer's engine, so Greg's fast as shit. So if you want a fast motor like Greg, you know who to get it from. That's our boy Ed at EB Mods. We covered engine topics. We covered sway bars. We covered chassis topics. We covered it all. So I want to say thanks to everybody that was watching. Always tend to forget to say this. Super important. Please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please share it with some of your friends because we're trying to grow this community for the Northeast. We're trying to really just bring a lot of good information to the other fellow racers, as well as kind of create a community around what we're trying to do, which is bring new people in. Sorry. One last thing. Have to throw some props to this little man out here, right? This guy's really, really important. So Dirt Nitro Challenge just happened, and one of our local guys, Ophir, this is his son, Benny Comerian. I kind of put a post out earlier this week that the vote was out on Ophir for a racer with the best sportsmanship. And but in all seriousness, this is his son who killed it and raced, I believe, in novice and won 2 separate classes. Benny's only 10 or 11 sportsman, 10 or 11 years old. He crushed it. What a good kid. What an emotional interview. If anybody saw it, he shed a tear. Most of us watching probably shed a tear for Benny. Really look forward to seeing him race the season. And he's kicking all of our asses. And, maybe at some point we might even get him on this podcast before the end of the season. So I just wanted to.
That photo is cut off too. He got 2 at first. He won Sportsman, Nitro Buggy, and Truggy.
All right. Well,
and he's 10, right?
Yeah, he's 10.
I got 30 years before he's in the 40+ class. Perfect. I'm good to go.
You'll be fucking dead before that happens.
We'll be in the 60+ class.
Exactly. Anyway, huge shout out for Benny. I also want to say huge shout out for one of my best buddies in RC, a guy that I met back in 2009 at Track 70. When we all start racing, we're always looking at another racer that's doing better or winning. And, I kind of say that's like our target guy that's out there. So this guy was my first target back in 2009. One of my best buddies today, Jerry Frazee, had a serious operation. I wish you nothing but the best in love and well in recovery. We're all, rooting for you, and we hope for you to be out and be racing with us soon. So I just wanted to take a second to say that he's one of my boys, very important. Episode 15. Opening day is happening very soon, right? We have opening day at Tom's Track at Rhythm RC Raceway. He's going to let us know roughly in May. But we do have an opener happening at the barn, which I believe is on the 7th of April. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Then I believe there's the Trains and Lanes opener, which is the following weekend, Kev?
I think it's April 27th.
April 27th? 13th?
27th.
Here at this podcast, we are not good on dates, but Toby Hampson has an awesome race calendar. You can always find it at 46 RC Media, and he'll keep you up to date, or offroadrcracer.com also shares Toby's same race calendar. And last but not least, LCRC is also having its opening day, which I believe is on the 17th, weekend of the 17th.
Yeah, I think that.
Right. All right, I think that's right. So those are the 3 big opening races that are going to be happening in our Northeast community. Check them out. We hope to see you guys at one or all of them. I appreciate all the help from all of our main guys, Toby, Tom Petrella, Vinny, thank you for your segment. KW, thanks for joining in. We all knew you would be showing up for this episode. And Ed, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. I can't do it without all of my guys and all the support from all the watchers. So subscribe, like, and check us out and share. Available on YouTube as well. Thanks a lot for watching the Northeast RC Racer podcast. We will see you guys for episode 16 next month. We'll see you guys soon.